Hey everyone, welcome to the Parts Girl podcast. I'm super excited to be interviewing Erica Bruno. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you, Kaylee. So excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And I've been following you for a while on LinkedIn. That's how we originally got connected. And we were just talking about like the first time we talked was probably like a year ago.
I
It's
know.
crazy.
I
And a
feel like
lot
time
has
is flying.
time is flying. And you've had some career moves and changes and things, and you do really good with your branding on LinkedIn. So, we're going to get into a lot of really good stuff today. So, I think the first thing I always like to talk about or ask my guests is there anything that you're hearing a lot of in the industry, anything that's standing out to you that you want to just point out that, and then we can just kind of go from there?
Yeah, so I think a huge thing, not only in the last few months of, my career change of going to CBC, but also at a SodaCon was a huge topic of discussion, was talking about the last few years and how drastically the industry has changed and just how COVID was a big disruptor in our industry. In some ways, a good thing, and in some ways, not so good. And
Hmm.
talking about how, what did we learn from COVID as far as like digital retailing and trying to make it easier for a customer and streamline our processes. But
Yeah.
also, what did we not do well in COVID? And how did we lose some of that personal touch? And how do we bring some of that back? And like a good example, I think, is really branding of, hey, how are we getting people into the stores? But not only that, how are we getting someone to do business with you specifically? And so I felt that was a really big theme of a SodaCon, and I felt it was really interesting because that's been a lot of the conversations I've been having.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And isn't it weird to say like I know whenever I bring up COVID, it's like it's hard and weird to say that there was good that came out from it because it was such a weird, hard, horrible thing in
Yeah.
time, but it did kind of move the industry really fast. Like
Yeah.
we're way ahead than we were.
Like I had a conversation the other day, and it's one of those where it's like I felt like COVID was kind of that shove a lot of us needed as far as digital processes, trying to get more digitally active compared to other industries, that maybe have been there a little bit sooner than the automotive industry in general. But then it's
Yeah.
also one of those where of like, you really now have to look at both sides. It's almost like bringing the old ways of doing business and the new ways of doing business and mashing them together and figuring out, okay, as we move forward, how do we then create customers for life? How do we get people to trust us, in a new world where maybe they didn't 100% feel comfortable coming into a dealership during COVID, things of that nature. And being able to say, hey, we can do it right here in the dealership. We can do mobile service. We could do mobile delivery. We can do all of these things because now we've learned and adapted to that. But it doesn't negate the fact that, you're still working with Erica. You're still working with so and so.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of like what you said, it kind of goes back to getting back to the basics of like doing business with a human, a person that you have a relationship with, but then also fast forward into like technology and how we can meet, customers where they want to be met and not just assuming like this is the only way we're going to do it
Yeah.
and here you go.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear, people who are talking about, like, especially women or minorities or multicultural languages, like, how do we then reach those people? And the first thing I ask is, are you putting them in your advertising? Are you, do you have them on your sales floor or in your service bays or on your service desk? Like, what does your dealership look like? And are you attracting the type of people you want to come into the dealership?
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Because that you want to attract the people that you want to do business with, and you have to be, you have to have that in your dealership. And I think too, another thing I've noticed is like even with us, like on LinkedIn and us branding and putting things out as our brand, that's happening in dealerships too with salespeople. And before it was like only company post or only company
Yeah.
stuff. And I think that that's the COVID thing where, we kind of had to figure out a new way to connect with people online, which is like the positive. It's always good to look at the positives of things.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting too, because like for me, having been at Constellation in the past, like they work with other industries other than just automotive. They work with pharmaceuticals, they work with B2B companies, B2C companies. And, at the time that I was there, you know, 2021-ish, 2022, it was a situation where, we were talking about influencer marketing a lot and how, it's growing and growing and growing. And we need that because
Yeah.
people connect human to human.
Yes.
And it's interesting that automotive is now following the trend. And there's always been this stigma of like, oh, come on, like, who do they think they are? And it's like, it's not about that though. Like, my persona, if you will, even though it's just me on LinkedIn, it is about me and about my experiences and the things that I've learned, but also about helping others because there's a lot of people who have had similar experiences or similar life stories that all of a sudden they go, wait, I can be this, I can do that. And it's like, yeah, of course you can. It's all in how you do your personal branding and how you communicate.
And how you just can share that information to because I know when I'm reading your stuff I'm like, oh, I experienced that too, or like it's a really cool thing to put it out there and just see that there are people and then too, as the writer, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. Like, I'm glad I
Yeah.
shared that information because you feel like alone. And I think that's a reason why this got really big during that time, is because we were so isolated. But something I am noticing now that we're, how long has it been? 4 years, 5 years? I don't even
Yeah,
know. I feel like we skipped years, but
I know.
I feel like we are getting back to this, I don't know what to call it, like this rut of really fast. And like, I feel like I'm not as, I know I just had a baby, but like, I feel so disconnected from people. And I feel like it's because we're so moving so fast now and we're all busy and
Yeah.
we're all traveling and like, it's like we're forgetting that slowdown that was also something that happened. I don't know. I don't know if it's just
No,
me.
no, I 100% agree. And like we had conversations about this at a SodaCon, whether within our WOCAM breakfast or, in other areas, just side conversations of talking about like
Yeah.
it's interesting to watch how maybe before the pandemic there was a little bit of that personal life, into the work life situation, but
Sure.
COVID basically completely decimated that for so many people. Where it's
Yeah.
like I'm working in my home, I'm doing this in my home. You got the kids in the background, you got cats, jumping in on Zoom's meeting, which might happen, and I apologize, but
That's okay.
um, like it I was watching a TED talk about bringing your whole self to work. And I think that's something that now is so important because of what happened with COVID, that people don't want the superficial company just, oh, happy this month or, employee appreciation, but there's no like actual human tie to it. Or you feel like it's just a facade, like it's not genuine and it's very superficial. And, you're seeing a lot of success when all of a sudden there is that personal or that more human touch to it because that's what people connect to. People
Yeah.
get excited by that. And I really do feel like if you don't have some of that human connection, you're really missing out.
You are. And I think the ability to share within a story, like the way you write the story, because we like stories. We like to read and hear and relate. And so actually that's a question I want to ask you was, I feel like you do a really good job painting the picture and sharing the story. Is there a
Thanks.
secret to that? Like, what do you think about when you're writing, or does it just like, are you just naturally like really? I'm sure you're naturally really good at, but like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you thinking
Yeah.
about when you're writing? Because I know when I write backwards. I tell the story backwards, and I
Oh, I love that.
I don't know what's wrong with me because I have to
No.
rearrange things as I'm saying it. But
No, I
anyway,
love that. So it's interesting that you asked me that question because I've been getting variations of this question a lot. Of like, how do you come up with your content? And like, what do you think about? And honestly, it kind of comes on the fly, like whatever I'm thinking or feeling in the moment.
those are the best. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm always thinking like, it's funny. I was having this conversation with my coworker actually yesterday, where it's like, some of the stuff that I share is very personal and very, yeah, I got bullied as a kid. I had gastric bypass surgery at 20 and lost over 100 pounds. And the biggest thing I learned from that is the way people treated me, and like that's a sad thing to say, but it's the truth. And
Mhm.
so, you constantly hear about how the world is so cruel and this and that. And I've been to 44 of the 50 states, and I can tell you that 90% of the time, there's really good people in this world. It's just, unfortunately, there's either systems or, cultures that they grew up in that keep them very, very isolated, very, very alone feeling. And the more I have conversations with people, the more you realize you really aren't alone. But it takes a lot of bravery and a lot of courage to put yourself out there. And I genuinely do believe that like the best type of people, like us that put ourselves out there, we're doing it because we want people not to feel alone or not, to feel like they're isolated. And the people that will use that to hurt you are probably really hurt people as well. And like they just haven't taken the time to fix that for themselves. And honestly, I wish that for them because I think that's the best thing you can do in your overall life is finally have a moment that says, you know what, is this my best self? Am I doing the things that I want to do? Because if you hold yourself back, you're never going to accomplish any of your dreams or goals.
Absolutely. And that's a great mindset to have as you're, if anyone's scared to put themselves out there and share experiences, is like, the people that are going to use that against you or pick on you is, you have to look at them like they have
Yeah.
things they need to work on. And it's sad. It's just sad because it's like, you go through that as a kid and then you go and it's just something you're always gonna experience. It never goes away. But dealing with it and block. There's a block button. That's what I
I love a
learned.
good block.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard one. But
I know.
you didn't answer the question. So you think of it
Oh,
on the fly, or like what goes through, what are you asking yourself as you're thinking of things on the fly? Like, and
you
how
know,
do you
I'll-
remember? Because I'm like, I'll be driving or I'll be like all over the place and I'm like, oh, I need to write about that. Or this is a good lead into something and then I forget all about it.
it's funny. The last few years, I'd say probably the last 4 years, especially. So, background for people who don't know my story. So, I got laid off during COVID, massive layoff, and I was at the time horrifically depressed. Like, didn't get out of bed for like a month. Like, I felt like a loser. And yeah, I got a severance, so like financially, I was okay, which was great, and I was very lucky for that. But at the same time, my career was everything to me, and so
Yeah.
I had felt like, what do I do now? Like, who am I without my career? And I literally just had this conversation the other week of like, at the time, it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But now, 4 years later, I realized it was the biggest blessing I could have ever gotten because it gave me a chance to reevaluate what I felt was important for me, reevaluate who I am now, and like everything that I've learned and everything that I've done. And then not only that, like, who do I want to be going forward? And like, what do I want to do? And what makes me excited to get up in the morning versus going, oh, this is just a job.
Hmm.
And I understand maybe not everyone's going to have that experience, but I genuinely hope at some point everybody does because it's the biggest, you know, change in your life that you'll ever have to suddenly go, this isn't what I want. So I always try to think of that moment of like, what would I tell either my past self, like little me, or like 5 years ago or 10 years ago? What advice would I give myself then? And then what is the type of advice or type of situations that I want to build for my future self? And that's really how I think about my content in general. And actually, CBC and I are working on not only individual content for myself, but for company content, tying a lot of that together of like, okay, especially company content. Like, how do we then, on a company level, do similar type of things that, again, doesn't feel fake, feels really genuine, connects with people, but also is, representative of who we are as a brand as well as our individual employees as a brand. And I feel
Yeah,
like that's really unique and awesome.
I really do. And I think that you're making me think of like as a company content, there's people that started the company. So you can talk like you can do the same thing you're doing as you, like you can as a company, what advice would you give your company self with like 5 years ago? And
Yeah,
then how are you, looking at things now? And then, how do you want to help people as a company? I think you can it crosses over. You can use that same mindset or that same strategy as a company. I just said
definitely.
company so many times.
I love it.
Okay, I want to talk about a SodaCon because
Yes.
I didn't get to go. I was
Oh,
invited.
no.
I was invited to speak, and I couldn't go. It was such a hard thing, but that's some sacrifices. When you have small kids. But next year I'm going. It's happening.
I can't wait.
But
Ugh.
I don't care. And I do want to go to Women in Automotive. Like, there's so many conferences that I had to like miss out on this year, and it's okay. But anyways, Asotafon, talk to me. Was that your first one? Have you been to other
It
ones?
was. No, it was my first DeSotoCon, and it was incredible because I've been to other conferences, and conferences are always great because you get to meet people and network and things of that nature, learn something. But this was just the energy was just amazing. Like literally, there were so many conversations, hugs, smiles. Like it didn't feel like you were trying to like sell someone. No, nor did someone like hard sell you per se. It was talking about collaboration, people, experiences, and again, like there were strategies around like used car service, data, privacy, etc. So like the meat and potatoes, if you will, of our industry. But at the
Yes.
end of the day, the overall like overarching themes were about people and experience and how do you make it like a safe and happy, fun culture, dealership company, whatever, that all of a sudden people are like, I have to do business with them.
I love that and energy. And you know what's really cool about what they do? And I'm wearing one of the shirts
I know, I
today.
wish I wore
I wore
one. I
it
didn't
for
even think
this.
of it.
Is they have that same energy online. Like you can feel
Yeah.
that energy with everyone that you interact with a Sodu. And they're just doing such great things. So the structure, it seems like, of the conference is different than no other conference I've really heard or gone to, which is a big deal.
Like it was great because you had the main stage where they had like Brian Benstock talked, Will Guidera, who was Unreasonable Hospitality talked, which was a great like ending keynote, and it
Yeah.
just talked again. Everything had a theme of like your people, your processes, your experiences for the customers, and then also like who you are within your community. And that hit me hard because growing up in dealerships, which actually I just realized I do have my love my people more than cars bracelet on.
Yay.
But you know, I grew up in dealerships. My grandfather had 17 different franchises. First Portuguese man, to have any dealership, at least from what I can tell. Might need
Wow.
to fact check that. And then my mom, first, female Toyota dealer principal in New England, seventh in the nation. And so
Um,
like, yeah, and I love it because like that's what I grew up with is my grandfather was very, very cognizant of his community and his, area that he grew up in and serving those people. And that was always his biggest thing is like I'm not only employing people, like I'm serving my communities. And I think that's something dealerships especially do so well. And I
they do.
think there's times that especially in the last few years, as dealerships are being bought by like larger groups and everything, they kind of lose it a little bit. And I think that's something that compared to other industries and other types of businesses just doesn't compare. And I
No.
think that's something that, if anything, talking about like the COVID era learnings, invest back in your people, invest back in your communities because they will always support you if you do that. And that's the biggest thing.
That is huge. And I think you're right. Over the years, I've always seen dealerships with be involved in the community, and that can go into your social media too. Because I interviewed, I'll think of it, but she's the marketing director at Berger Chevrolet, and she's very good at community and like sharing that information. And it's just, you got to share it,
You have
and
to.
yeah, it's a big deal.
Because and we talk about this in wocan is like if you don't see yourself reflected in leadership or executives or things of that nature, it's hard to really connect of like, oh, could I get there within my career? And I say it's the same exact thing with customers. Like literally I was in some dealerships the other day and I'm talking to this couple. It was a Subaru dealership. They had Subaru since 1999. They were coming in to buy their next Forester, which was a 2024 brand new Forester. And they literally like we just struck up a conversation and they go, I will never buy anything else because my old Forester, my 2014, saved our lives. And then they told me about how they got into a horrific accident, which basically like it was miraculous they were not hurt more, honestly. And it was one of those they were like, it was the car. Like the car saved us. And that's the type of stuff having worked at Toyota, having worked at, other OEMs that again are known for safety, like
Mhm.
you can't compare that. And not only that, like they have that personal tie with that dealership. So it's not just the OEM, it's not just the dealership. Like it's a full funnel thing. And
Yeah.
if you're not capitalizing on that and connecting with those humans, you're not going to be as successful.
No, you're not. And you know what? I was just interviewing someone and we were talking about how like service, service advisors aren't, you don't think of them like if you ask them what they do, they don't say I sell service. They there's like 10 different things. But
Yeah.
really you're selling safety because that's the biggest thing is, educating people on like if you don't do this, it's a safety concern on your vehicle because not a lot of people
Yeah.
are educated that this could cause a problem if you're not fixing these things, I think. And
Well, and I
that's a
love that you brought that up because, like, frankly, I was very excited to be on this because service and parts are like my jam, and I love service and parts because, like, growing up in the dealerships, I, did appointment setting, BDC,
that's so
things of that
fun.
nature. And then when I started my career on the OEM side, I was a district service and parts manager, and like my service and parts managers are still some of the best people that I know and talk to, and I think service especially, sales is important, but service keeps the lights on.
It
Service
does.
is really where the bread and butter of the business is. And it's even more important in service that you have an impeccable customer experience. Because exactly like you said, you're selling safety, you're selling convenience, you're saying, hey, we are the experts on your vehicle and we will take care of you. Whether
Yeah.
you need a new tire, whether you need an oil change, whether your engine has blown up, like if someone's coming to you for service, it's one of two things. They want the reliability and the safety of knowing that their car is taken care of for, the minor things. And then also that moment where they go, oh no, something's really wrong with my car. I have to take it to XYZ Toyota, XYZ Nissan. You know what I mean? And like, I know they'll take care of me. And I think that's something, especially during COVID, that, the fact that we had inventory shortages plus the fact that people are holding on to their cars even longer, if you
Mhm.
are not actively looking at your service and parts departments and going, how do we make this even better? And not only that, how are we advertising that we're making this even better?
Yeah.
You're really losing out.
Oh, totally. And not to mention, I think something I was talking to my husband about was he was like, there's consumers are buying are okay with buying vehicles with higher miles nowadays. And those cars need more service. But then he was also talking about like the transparency of like, they're buying it and thinking it's like a new car. They're treating it like a new car.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
And that's the other thing, so I started in 2009. So, like, depth of the recession after
Oh,
2008
God.
during the crash. And I tell people all the time that this time is very reminiscent to me of that 2008, 2009, 2010 period, where again, cars were really older because people could not afford to get into new cars. We didn't have as strong of incentives because, the OEMs were trying to figure out what to do. Things that were happening is that people were starting to invest more in their cars, and then that created a much longer life cycle than historically we ever had. But it then caused the OEMs to then look at, okay, how do we maybe create cars that not only can last longer if they need to, but then on the sales side, how do we then get them churning a little bit faster than they used to? And
Yeah,
that's a delicate balance. But
it is.
especially the service part, like you've got to get that dialed in.
You have to. And you said something that kind of triggered because what we're going through, like, I feel like is similar to the 2008 is, I think, when it all happened.
Yeah, 2008 was the cash for clunkers, where again, people trying to get, out of the smoggy type of vehicles, if you will, as far as EPA standards. And then not only that, like if you think about it, so what the Prius was 2002, I think was the first one, 2001. I got to double check on that. But, you started to see hybrids, which at the time, I remember everybody being like, huh, hybrids. Like, who's going to want a hybrid? What are you hearing today? Huh, who wants an EV? And again, you could argue the pros and the cons all day, but it doesn't negate that it's another option for people to have transportation. And at the end of the day, and my grandfather said this to me and I will never forget it. He goes, Erica, people need a few simple things. They need food, they need water, and they need transportation. Doesn't matter if it's a horse or a car. And it's so true because like it's needed in today's world. And I think the way you distinguish what is best for the customer is to ask them about their lifestyle and ask, hey, what is the best thing that you need? And like, regardless of what it is, you're taking care of the customer if you've satisfied their needs.
Yeah. And asking them questions and not assuming like this is what you need,
Yep.
finding the best solution for them. Because I think that's going to be like the biggest thing the next couple of years is really figuring out what, not mistakes, but like what decisions did they make a couple years ago that they're trying to get out of now? Or yeah, there's going to be a lot of shifts and everything. But I think it's, I don't want to, because I'm not like an expert in market and money and all of that stuff, but I think what we're going through is similar, but so different too. I don't know how to explain it because
No, no,
obviously
no.
back at that time, what I remember, I was younger, but what I remember was it was the mortgage, it was the housing
Yes.
market was they were giving out loans like there was no rules and they were just overdoing it in that and that's why. But then that's still like if you think about it now, I think the reason why I'm talking about it is very triggering for me because my parents made bad decisions during that time and we lost everything.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal to me. And now going through, now that I'm an adult and I'm going through like, I'm like really scared of making
No,
the
so
bad.
you bring up the perfect point, and this has also been a big part of the conversations I've been having lately is the generational differences. So
Yeah.
we've been talking about it on the advertising side, but also in the actual buying side of things. So
Yeah.
advertising, a lot of people have been pushing towards digital the last few years, and I get it. Like digital is the new hot thing. It is great. And I do think it's incredibly important to have as a part of your marketing plan. However, when you look at like my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, they're not carrying around this all the time, or if they are, it's superficial. It's for a phone, maybe text messaging, maybe a little bit of Facebook, but they're not really overly engaging on it. Whereas like
Yeah.
our generation and younger are very heavy into the digital side. But when you look at the things that they're consuming, the type of medias, it's radio, it's TV, maybe streaming, maybe, mail, email. And, I was having this conversation with the GM the other day where you have to have a strong traditional presence of media, but you also have to have a strong digital presence and marry those two together so the entire message is cohesive down the entire funnel. But then when you go to buying habits, it's the same exact thing. You have older generations that again have a little bit longer of wealth, if you will, to a certain degree, that are more comfortable paying higher payments because they have the means to do so. Whereas, like our generation and younger, to a certain degree, and again, it varies as you start to get into some of the 20-year-olds, which is a different subject, but
That's a different subject.
totally different subject. We could have an entire podcast on it. But you get, especially to like our generation, when you look at the buying habits of our generation, which is, I'll say like 30 to 45, maybe 50, you're looking at the fact that, again, they want a reliable car for a reasonable price, nothing crazy, nothing out of the ordinary. But they're also like, we're not going toward that, oh, shiny, look at me. I have to have the G Wagon, to show off type thing that our parents' generation had. We're
That's
a
true.
little bit more sensible because we have huge amounts of student loan debt or debt in general. It's a lot harder to buy a house now and the mortgages are insane. So like, because when you think about it, mortgage and a car are the two biggest purchases you're going to make in your entire life.
Yeah.
So people are looking at, okay, what's the type of housing I'm going to live in? Maybe I'm going to rent because it's actually more affordable to me based on my income. And then they're looking at cars that, again, might have 100,000 miles, but it's within their price range. And they're staying within their price range because they quite literally cannot go outside of that budget because exactly like you said, otherwise they've seen it happen with other generations or family that have overextended themselves and then go into bankruptcy or really have lost everything. And
Yeah.
it's just not the same.
It
So it's
isn't.
talking to those different generations differently as well.
You absolutely have to because you have to think about like at that time what our generation was experiencing and seeing, and then as and how that affects, us now later in life too,
Yeah,
and how we buy and think about things. Yeah, it's a big deal.
it is. I mean, everything is expensive now. It's
Oh
insane.
my
Cars are expensive, gas is expensive. It's not like you can
God.
get a break anywhere. So a lot of people are going, I don't need an Audi. I can do a Toyota Corolla and it's
Mhm.
brand new and I get 40 miles to the gallon, whatever it is, because that's more important to them.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah, food is just it's so expensive. I saw something, I don't know how real it is, and I don't eat Taco Bell very often. I ate it more when I was pregnant because I craved like the taco.
I was
But
just going to say, I love a good Taco Bell run.
yeah, it's good. And but I saw something, it was like just their, taco is now like $3 to $4, where like a couple years ago it was like $2. It's like
Yeah.
you don't really realize how much things have shifted because it's only a couple of dollars, but you add that to a bigger expensive thing, it's just I don't understand why. It's so
No,
expensive.
like I was traveling this week and going to get like a coffee and a bagel was like $17. And I'm like, I remember when this used to be like 10. And like,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, even with the last few years, I know there's been some reporting of, better incomes and things of that nature, but it's still not to the level needed for the rise of the inflation. So it's like
It's like
our
better
generation
income,
feels like
but
it can't win.
yeah, we can't win. It's like you
Yeah.
make more, but then everything's it's like, can we just level out?
Can I
And then
just get a break?
just get a break, please. But no, I mean, on a positive note, like
Yeah.
we're so fortunate to be in the industry we are, and I think it's overlooked a lot. And
Yes.
I think someone posted on Facebook this like thing about how the auto industry is overlooked and there's so much opportunity, and it was one of those like copy and paste things.
Yeah.
And
I think it was
I was
Colby.
like, was it Colby? Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, he's good at that stuff. And I was like, this is perfectly said. And yeah, it's a good industry to be in, and so much positive things happen.
I love
Um,
this industry though because you can literally have nothing and make something extraordinary for yourself. You could have
I think
no
that's the big
formal
thing.
education,
Yeah,
like it's amazing. My grandfather never even completed 8th grade because he had to quit to support his family. And so he started in a body shop and that's how he started and then he, bought the Chrysler store and even then had people being like, you're not the type of dealer that we want, aka you're too dark. And he was like, well, I'll show you what type of dealer I can be. And like that's the energy of this industry, and that's what I love the most. And I think especially for women, and people of color, like this industry can be incredible if you stick it out and you work hard and you do what you can and don't be afraid to push and be yourself.
absolutely. You just said it perfectly. You summarized it. It's like there's opportunity. You don't have to have like a degree or something. You make it what it is, and you have to put in the work. That's the biggest thing. It's not gonna just happen. You have to put in the work to make it happen.
That's also
Um,
one of my like biggest pet peeves because so I do have my degree, but it's in history and anthropology with minor in jazz voice. And I did it purposely because that's the stuff that I enjoyed. And I knew I could get anywhere I wanted to go if I worked hard enough and I learned enough. And I think that's something where, some of the big corporations especially really lose out on a lot of talent because they're only looking for that degree. And
they
I
are.
I tell people all the time, I said a degree is great. It's kind of like a marriage. The wedding is amazing or it could be terrible, but it's the marriage that matters. A degree is great, but it's your career that
It's
matters.
the work that matters. Yeah.
Yep,
Experience. Yeah.
exactly.
You're right. A lot of bigger corporations, I think, do miss out on talent because say that requirement, and it's a shame. But a lot of industry or companies in the automotive industry don't require that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing what we can do. Is there anything that you have going on coming up that you want to shout out, or anything that you're doing or working on to put it out there
Um,
before?
I, I feel like I've been getting a lot of really great feedback on the videos that I did, and there's going to be a lot more. We're building a lot more content in general, so I'm really excited for that. WOCAN has our annual luncheon coming up at NAMAD in August, and I'm very excited for that. Last year was incredible. Yeah, it's a constant whirlwind, but it's going to be good. I'm excited for the rest of 2024.
I am too, and I think those videos that you're doing is really great, and everything you're doing with Spokane is awesome.
Thank
And
you.
we'll make sure to put out like when that's happening. And there's virtual meetings. Is that the virtual meetup or is that
No,
in
that's
person?
in person.
That's an in-person one.
So the luncheon's in person, but we do have virtual meetings for our members and allies coming up, and we should have more, to share from that angle. And then we also have speaker series. There's a lot of stuff that we do. If you're interested, you can go to Wocan's website, which is wocautonetwork.com. And then if anybody would love to sponsor Wocan, you can certainly reach out because we do need sponsorships for our luncheon. And yeah.
I love it. We'll have the links out there. And then, yeah, you can go on the website too and subscribe so you get updated, because I know I get the emails that update me on what's going on. So that's always helpful. Thank you so much, Erica, for coming on.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Thank you for joining us. PartsEdge, the power tool for your parts department. We hope you're leaving feeling motivated, challenged, and inspired.